We are following breaking news out of the Supreme Court, which has just blocked the Trump administration from deploying the National Guard in Illinois. The justices rejecting the White House's claim that the troops were needed to protect federal agents carrying out immigration enforcement, particularly in and around the Chicago area. The decision represents a rare defeat for this administration by this conservative-leaning court. Joining me now is NBC News senior Supreme Court reporter Lawrence Hurley. So, Lawrence, what did the justices say in their ruling?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, this is a pretty significant setback for the Trump administration, because the court was saying here that this law that the Trump administration was trying to use to deploy National Guard in Chicago.
Merry Christmas and happy holidays to everyone out there. But folks, hold on to your seats, because Washington just delivered a lump of coal that is absolutely explosive. We are talking about an earth-shattering development that nobody saw coming this fast. The Supreme Court just stepped in and dropped a massive hammer on President Trump's second-term agenda right out of the gate. This is breaking news that changes the entire playing field. Before we dive into this absolute madness, if you want the real story that the mainstream media tries to sugarcoat, smash that subscribe button right now. You need to be tuned in for what's coming next, because it is going to get wild. Okay, let's get straight to it. This is huge. We knew there was major tension building up in Illinois. We knew the president wanted to send in the troops. But what just happened in the last few hours has stunned everyone in this country on both sides of the aisle. The United States Supreme Court has issued an emergency ruling, and it's not just a polite no, it is a massive stop sign for the White House. They have officially blocked President Trump from deploying the National Guard into Illinois. And remember the setup here? Governor Pritzker in Illinois did not want these troops in his state. He explicitly said no, but the president was preparing to send them anyway. The administration argued that there was essentially a rebellion happening and that the president needed soldiers on American soil to protect federal ICE agents who were allegedly under threat. It was shaping up to be an absolute showdown between a state governor and the president of the United States over who controls the ground. Well, the highest court in the land just jumped right into the middle of that fight and blew the whistle. They said, no, you cannot do that. The administration's lawyers were scrambling, arguing that this move was necessary to restore order. But the justices looked at the law, specifically something called the Posse Comitatus Act, which basically says you can't just use the military as police inside the country whenever you feel like it. And they determined the president does not have the authority in this situation. This isn't just a small speed bump. This is a brick wall. It is a stunning blow. And what makes it even crazier is who delivered the blow. We are talking about a court with a solid conservative majority. Many of these justices were put there to back a strong executive branch, but when the push came to shove on this specific issue of sending troops into a state against that state's will, they looked at the arguments and they shut down the president's plan. Cold. It's a total shocker. And it is the very first major legal defeat of Trump's second term on domestic issues. This isn't just about Illinois anymore. This is about the limits of presidential power in America right now. It's chaos, folks. Absolute legal and political chaos breaking out over the holidays. Think about the timing here. Everyone is supposed to be relaxing with family, opening presents, taking a break from the political madness. And instead, we have a constitutional crisis unfolding in real time on our phones. The administration thought they had a clear path. They thought they could override Governor Pritzker and put boots on the ground to handle what they called an out-of-control situation. They were ready to move. The trucks were probably gassed up, and then out of nowhere, the Supreme Court slams the door shut. It's an emergency order, meaning they didn't even wait for full arguments and months of deliberation. They saw what was about to happen and they said stop. And the fact that they cited the law that keeps the military separate from local police work is incredibly significant. It sends a message that there are still lines that cannot be crossed, even by the president. This has left the White House completely stunned. They didn't see this coming from this specific court. And now everything they planned to do in Illinois is totally frozen. Why is everyone losing their minds over this? Why does this matter to you, sitting at home watching this during your holiday break? Because this is not normal, and we need to really let this sink in. This is terrifying territory we are walking into. We aren't just talking about some boring policy disagreement about taxes or roads. And we are talking about the American military being deployed onto American streets against the direct orders of a state, the governor. That is the kind of stuff you read about in history books during very dark times, or you see on the news happening in unstable countries halfway across the world. You do not expect to see that kind of high-stakes showdown here at home in modern America. This ruling is serious because it stops a precedent from being set right now. Think about it. If the president could just send the National Guard wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted, just by claiming there was a rebellion, regardless of what the local leader said, that changes everything about how our country works. It would mean states don't really have a say in their own security anymore. The Supreme Court realized the stakes. They saw that if they let this go through, there might be no going back. That's why this is so historic. It's a massive check on presidential power at a time when many people thought presidential power was basically unlimited. Let's be real for a second. Americans deserve better than this drama. We deserve a country where the state government and the federal government aren't locked in a cage match over who controls the streets. We deserve a system where we aren't worrying over the holidays if soldiers are going to be marching through American cities against the will of the people living there. The fact that it even got to this point where the Supreme Court had to issue an emergency stop order shows just how broken things are right now in Washington. It shows a level of conflict and aggressive maneuvering that is frankly exhausting for the average person just trying to live their life. This ruling also throws a massive wrench into the entire agenda for the second term. The administration came in hot, ready to use muscle to get things done domestically. They wanted to show strength. Well, the legal system just showed strength right back. This suggests that the next few years are not going to be a smooth ride of executive orders and swift action. It is going to be a brutal, grinding battle in the courts every single step of the way. And while the lawyers fight it out in expensive suits, what about the actual problems on the ground? The reasons why they wanted to send troops in the first place. Are those problems getting solved today? No, they are just sitting there while the political titans clash in DC. It's frustrating, it's scary, and honestly, it's a mess. This ruling is a huge stop sign, but it's also a loud alarm bell ringing for everyone in this country that things are incredibly unstable right now. We have never really been here before in modern times. A president ready to move, a governor standing in the doorway saying no, and the Supreme Court throwing itself in between them at the last possible second. It feels like a movie script, but it's real life. And the fact that the conservative justices were the ones to pull the brake makes it even more confusing and chaotic. It proves that predictions are useless right now. Nobody knows what is going to happen tomorrow. The stability we took for granted is gone. We are in uncharted waters, folks, and this Supreme Court ruling is just the first massive wave crashing over the bow. If you thought the ruling itself was a bombshell, wait until you hear the reaction. Because, folks, the reaction isn't just loud, it is absolutely deafening. The moment this news broke, the entire country seemed to split right down the middle, and the noise is off the charts. We are seeing a level of anger and celebration that we haven't seen in years, and it is all happening at once. Let's start with the people who are cheering. The governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, and his camp are taking a massive victory lap right now. For them and for Democrats across the country. This isn't just a court whim. They are calling it a victory for the Constitution. They are out there saying that the system worked, that the guardrails held, and that no president is above the law. You can hear the sigh of relief coming from civil liberties groups. They were terrified, and they thought we were moments away from seeing tanks rolling down the streets of Chicago against the governor's orders. So for them, today is a day of celebration, and they believe the Supreme Court just saved the concept of state sovereignty, the idea that a state has the right to manage its own affairs without the federal government kicking down the door. But on the other side, oh boy, it is a completely different story. And this is where things get really dangerous. The outrage from President Trump's supporters is explosive. I'm looking at the comments, I'm listening to the calls coming in, and people are furious. They feel betrayed. Remember, millions of Americans voted for this president specifically because they wanted him to crack down. They wanted him to restore order. They look at what is happening in Illinois, the reports of danger to federal agents, the chaos, and they believe the president was doing the right thing. To them, this Supreme Court ruling isn't justice, it's a setup. They are accusing the court of endangering the lives of those ICE agents. They are asking, since when do we let technicalities stand in the way of safety? There is a huge sense of shock that the conservative justices, the very people Trump helped put on the bench, turned around and blocked him. They are calling them traitors in robes. The feeling of betrayal is deep. You have supporters online demanding that the president ignore the ruling entirely. They want him to say, thanks for your opinion, but I'm the commander-in-chief and I'm going in. And that is what makes the legal experts so nervous. I'm talking to people who have studied the court for decades and they are stunned. They cannot believe how quickly the majority of the court turned against the president on such a huge issue of executive power. Usually, the court gives the president a lot of leeway when it comes to national security or protecting federal officers, but not this time. The legal analysts are saying this is a clear signal that the court is not going to be a rubber stamp for the second term. However, we have to mention the dissent. Justices Alito and Thomas did not agree with the majority. They stood with the president. They argued that the court shouldn't be tying the president's hands in an emergency, and that split in the court. That disagreement is fueling the fire. It gives the president's supporters a reason to say, see, even some justices think this ruling is wrong. So right now, the country is totally divided. One half is popping champagne, celebrating that the rule of law stopped a military overreach. The other half is boiling with rage, feeling like the system is rigged to stop them from fixing the country's problems. The tension is thick, you can cut it with a knife, and the scariest part, this anger isn't going away, it is building. Both sides feel like the other side is trying to destroy the country. The temperature in America just went up about 10 degrees, and we were already at a boiling point. Now, we need to look at the key players here, because this is where the rubber meets the road. This isn't just about documents and lawyers anymore. This is about egos, power, and what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. First, let's talk about the man in the center of the storm, President Donald Trump. Sources inside the White House are saying the mood there is absolute thunder. The president is reportedly furious. He feels hamstrung. He made a promise to his voters that he would secure the country and protect federal officers, and now he is being told no by the very people he thought would have his back. This is a president who prides himself on strength, on action, being told to stand down by a court that does not sit well with him. The big question everyone is asking is, will he listen? That is the terrifying scenario that nobody wants to talk about, but we have to. There are whispers, just whispers for now, but they are there. That's some in his circle are advising him to push the envelope. They are telling him that the safety of the ICE agents is more important than a piece of paper from the Supreme Court. If the president decides to challenge this, if he decides to say that the court got it wrong, and he has a duty to act anyway. Folks, we are in a constitutional crisis that makes everything else look like a picnic. Then you have Governor J.B. Pritzker in Illinois. He is standing tall right now, but don't think for a second he isn't sweating. He knows he just won a huge battle, but the war isn't over. He has to prove that he can handle the situation in his state without federal troops. All eyes are on him now. If violence breaks out, or if something happens to those federal agents while the National Guard is held back, the blame is going to shift right onto his shoulders. He is walking a very tightrope. He has to keep the peace, or else the president's arguments will look right. And the pressure to intervene will come roaring back, court ruling or not. And we can't forget the Department of Justice. The DOJ lawyers are scrambling. They just took a massive punch to the gut. They have to figure out a new strategy immediately. Do they try to appeal? Is there another legal angle? Or do they have to go back to the president and tell him, "Sir, we are out of options"? Being the bearer of that bad news is not a job anyone wants right now. This is the escalation point. We are in the eye of the storm. The ruling has been handed down, but the troops haven't moved away yet. The rhetoric is heating up. You have the president feeling cornered, the governor feeling vindicated but under pressure, and the Supreme Court standing in the middle trying to hold the line. What happens in the next 24 to 48 hours is critical. Will the president put out a statement accepting the ruling, or will he double down? Will he attack the justices on social media? Will he try to find a loophole to send different kinds of federal agents instead of the National Guard? And this is why this story is so serious. It is not over. In fact, it feels like it is just beginning. We are watching a high-stakes poker game with the Constitution of the United States, and nobody knows who is going to blink first. The uncertainty is the worst part. We are waiting for the next shoe to drop. And with personalities this big and stakes this high, you can bet that the next move is going to be drastic. Stay tuned, because history is being written right now, and it is being written in bold, angry letters. So where do we go from here? That is the million-dollar question, keeping everyone in Washington and across the country awake tonight. We are staring into a fog of uncertainty, and what might emerge from that fog could look very different from the America we woke up in yesterday. We have to speculate responsibly here, but we also have to be real about the possibilities, because the rule book has essentially been thrown out the window. First, let's talk about the White House's next move. President Trump is not known for taking no for an answer, especially when he believes he has a mandate to act. The Supreme Court blocked the National Guard specifically because of the Posse Comitatus Act, that rule that separates military and police duties. But here's the catch, and this is where things could get tricky. That act applies to the military. It does not necessarily apply to other federal agents. We could see a massive pivot in strategy. Instead of green uniforms, we might see a flood of federal law enforcement, agents from Homeland Security, the U.S. Marshals, or tactical units from within the DOJ. The president could argue, fine, no National Guard, but I'm sending in every federal badge I have. This would bypass the court-specific ruling while achieving the exact same result: a massive federal presence in Illinois against the governor's wishes. If that happens, we are right back to square one, but with a different uniform. Governor Pritzker would likely sue again, and we would be stuck in this legal loop while tensions on the ground get hotter and hotter. And then there is the nuclear option. Legally speaking, the Insurrection Act. This is the big red button. The administration argued they were quelling a rebellion, but the court didn't buy it this time. However, if the situation in Illinois deteriorates, if, heaven forbid, there is a major incident where federal agents are hurt or there is widespread destruction, and the president could go back to the court with fresh evidence. He could say, look, I told you it was a rebellion, and now look what happened. If the situation on the ground gets worse, the pressure on the Supreme Court to flip their decision will be immense. They might be forced to unlock the president's power just to stop the bleeding. We also have to look at the political fallout. We are in the second term. The midterms are always looming in the distance. This fight is going to energize the bases of both parties like never before. Democrats are going to run on this for the next year, screaming that they are the only thing standing between the people and a military state. Republicans are going to run on the idea that the courts and the Democrats are conspiring to let chaos reign and endanger officers. It is going to make the political divide even wider, if that is even possible. And what about the states? This ruling sets a precedent, but it also sets a challenge. Other governors who are opposed to the president's agenda are going to feel emboldened. They might start refusing cooperation on other issues: immigration, environmental rules, healthcare. citing this victory, and we could see a domino effect where state after state starts putting up walls against the federal government, leading to a fractured country where the rules change the moment you cross a state line. I want you to think about what this means for your future. If the president can be blocked this easily, is the government too weak to protect us? Or if the president was almost able to send troops against the governor's will, is the government too strong for our own good? These are the questions that will define the rest of this decade. This story is moving fast, and the mainstream media will try to spin it to fit their agenda. They will tell you it is all simple, that one side is good and the other is evil, but you know it is more complicated than that. That is why we are here, to dig deeper, to look at the uncomfortable truths. I need you to be part of this conversation. Do not just watch and scroll away. I want to know where you stand. Was the Supreme Court right to stop the president? Or did they just endanger national security? Is Governor Pritzker a hero for state rights? Or is he obstructing justice? Go to the comments section right now and let it out. I read every single one, and I want to see the debate happening down there. And listen, if you value this kind of raw, unfiltered analysis, if you want to know what is really happening while the rest of the world is sleeping, you need to make sure you are subscribed. Click that button, turn on the notification bell, because if the president makes a move in the middle of the night, or if the governor escalates this tomorrow morning, I'm going to be right here breaking it down for you. You cannot afford to miss the next update. We are living through history, folks. Years from now, people will ask where you were when the Supreme Court blocked the president in the winter of 2025. They will ask how the country reacted. We are writing that story together right now. So hold your families close, enjoy your holiday, but keep one eye open. The world is changing fast, and silence is not an option. We have to stay vigilant. We have to stay informed. But the scariest what if concerns the people on the streets. When leaders clash like this, when the rhetoric is this hot, it filters down, people are angry, people are scared. If the supporters of the president feel the system is broken, and the supporters of the governor feel they are under siege, the chance for clashes between regular citizens goes through the roof. We are sitting on a powder keg. The Supreme Court may have paused the government action, but they cannot pause the emotion and the anger that is bubbling up in communities across America. We are entering a phase of testing. Every institution is being tested. The presidency, the courts, the state governments. Can they coexist? Or is one going to finally overpower the others? The next few weeks will determine if this was just a holiday crisis or the beginning of a fundamental shift in how America is governed. The chessboard has been flipped, and everyone is scrambling to pick up the pieces before the next turn. This brings us to the end of this broadcast, but honestly, it feels like the start of something much bigger. We have covered the legal shock, the political rage, and the dangerous uncertainty that is hanging over our heads this Christmas. But before we go, I need to speak directly to you. We often watch the news like it is a TV show. We see the characters, Trump, Pritzker, the justices, and we cheer for our team and boo the villain, but this isn't entertainment. This is the machinery of our country grinding its gears. When the Supreme Court has to step in on an emergency basis to stop the military from deploying into a U.S. state, that is a warning light flashing on the dashboard of our democracy. It tells us that the normal ways of solving problems are failing. It tells us that conversation and compromise have died, replaced by orders and lawsuits. And most importantly, we have to remember that this country belongs to us, the people. Not the politicians in Washington, not the judges in robes, but us. It is up to us to pay attention when the foundations start to shake. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about what happens to this nation. I'm going to stay on this story until we get answers. And until next time, stay sharp, stay safe, and don't let them pull the wool over your eyes. This is your country. Let's keep watching it.